Hello, YouTube. It's Amber, or Quimpet. Uh, Logging on, say hi. It's been quite a while since I've made any videos, um, and I've had some ideas for some videos rolling through my head, and thought it's time for me to maybe make another video. I know I've been quiet on here for quite a while, and that's fine. That's fine. I've been living life and still doing the witch thing. It hasn't changed. I'm on different platforms, doing it in different ways, and I'm still at it. I'm still at it. So I've I've been reluctant to make videos because there's just so much wish content out there right now. There's just so much. It's mind-blowing. And I asked myself, well, what can I even add to that, and the one thing that I can add is that I've been on this path for a really long time. Excuse me. I've been a little under weather for the past week, so I apologize for the congestion and the coughs that will ensue, and maybe the nose blowing. But I've been on this path for roughly 26 years, give or take a few years, depending on how you want to view it. And what I can talk about is how much someone's path can change over the years and the different ebb and flow of your witchcraft and spiritual practice as the years go by. Um, as I've said, I've been at it for a while, and even though when I speak of my witch path, I kind of view it as starting at around 99, 2000. Though, like many practicing witches, I could say, oh, I've been doing witchcraft ever since I was a child. Um, which is not inaccurate, but on the same note, I wasn't, um, it wasn't in the forefront of my brain, you know what I mean? It wasn't a conscious thing. I was exposed to metaphysics and the occult and witchcraft and tarot cards and all kinds of stuff very, very young, very, very early in my life. Oh, I have an older sister who was very interested in that in the early 90s. So I was learning about, the Egyptian gods and how to use a pendulum and about Wicca when I was like 6, 7, and 8. So it's always been part of my life, but it wasn't until I was in my mid late teens, about 15, 16, that I started personally practicing and researching and delving into it. And so I started in my teens and I went the whole way through my 20s, my 30s, and now into my 40s. And the path you'll find, you will change a whole lot, and then sometimes you'll come back to things. Um, One thing that I've come across with a lot of people is they'll tell me, "Oh, I've been in a dry spell. I haven't been researching. I haven't been doing ritual. I haven't been doing a lot of witch things. I haven't been focusing on it because, maybe people are having kids or they're going back to school or jobs are really busy or they're dealing with health issues." And excuse me. Um, but here's the thing about this path is you can set it down and pick it back up whenever you want. And even in those times when you're setting the path down and you don't feel like you're focusing on it as much, all of these people, and myself included, is will still do little things that we'd learned. For example, I started my path, when I was about 16, 15, 16, and I was really on that path and really studying for about 3 or 4 years. And then when I got to about 19, 20, I kind of set it down for a while. Didn't have an altar, but I was still utilizing certain aspects that I had learned. For example, like shielding, like when I would go out places or if I'd walk at night, I would put up a shield, just little things that I would still do. And even though I wasn't doing the full rituals or the meditations, I was still practicing. And by the time I hit about 23, 24, I picked my practice back up. And because I'm not really sure, I can't really remember what motivated me. I remember at that time I had had my own apartment. Maybe I was looking through my book collection because I have quite a selection, not a huge selection, but a pretty decent sized selection of witch books that my that were given to me that I had bought, and it was always an interest, like I am a bit of a book hoarder, so I would buy books and not even read them and just like skim through them later. um, but I picked it back up in my early 20s, made a new altar. I am that cliche of using my grandmother's coffee table as an altar. I loved it. I still love it. I still would use it if I could, but it's just not conducive for my household right now. It's really nice to have that long space. um, but even that, for example, as things change, I no longer use the long altar. I have multiple altars in my house. I have a altar that's like my main altar. I have a downstairs altar. I have an altar in my sunroom. I've got mini altars in my kitchen. You like I have altars everywhere in the house, and there's more that I want to make. Like I just haven't gotten to that point. So that's a thing that changes. Um I had spoke about, maybe setting the practice down. And in your witchcraft practice, there will be an ebb and flow. There will be times where you are really studying and you're really, putting a lot of effort into it. And then there's times that you just don't have that, and that's fine. And you're just kind of like phoning it in. And that is fine. It will change. And the things that you research will change as well. What I'm really into now is, I right now I'm focusing on my community again, trying to organize a public event. That's where I'm at right now on my path, is trying to organize public events. Never done public events. I've done kind of private events, but now I'm at a different point. There was a point when I first started my path, I was like really into astral travel and astral projection and dream work. And that's still consistent. Like, I still am fascinated by that, and I still have dreams that I need to interpret, but it's not as prevalent in my path. It ebbs and flows. There are times where I'll have, well, that'll come up for a while, and then it'll go away for a while, and then it'll come up again, and then it'll go away again. Um, herbs have maintained, like I've always had an interest in herbs throughout my entire path, even before I started like identifying myself as a witch. I mean, I always give credit for my love of herbs from my fourth grade teacher. She was a hobby herbalist, and she sold my class a bunch of herbs that she started, and that kind of set me off on my herb journey. I mean, as young as 9, 10 years old, and still to this day I always like to have certain herbs growing. It's just part of my practice. Now, how I use those herbs, it has changed throughout the years. Oh my goodness. Like, there was a time that I only used herbs medicinally. Like, I didn't use herbs. I didn't use herbs in my spell work. Wasn't until I was in like my mid 20s that I started actually using herbs to make like little sachets and use it in spell work, because I just didn't get it. A huge portion of my practice was mental. Like, I really focused in my early years, I really focused on using myself as the main tool, through meditation and focus and breath work. And it wasn't until later in my 20s and 30s that I started using the material things like the crystals and the herbs. Um, I just didn't do that. It was a different thing. And I know some people, they'll start with the material things like the crystals and the herbs, and then they don't link up themselves with the items. So I focused more on my internal magical uses like mindset and chants. That was a big part. Um, and then later the objects. Now, I would use like string. Something that stayed in my path the whole time is my interest is mostly folk magic, and I think I've mentioned this in past videos. Like I really focus more on the folk magic side. While I do ritual, I'm not really as into the high end magic and high end occultism. It's just not my jam. I'm more of magic for the people, the cunning folk, the practical kind of everyday magic you need in your life to like, you know, keep away bad energies from your house, find a good parking space, work with the plants in the backyard. Um, I've definitely over the years have worked more with plants spiritually, like I've noticed the evolution of my practice. I worked with herbs as a young child, but it was more physical. It was like this is what you could do with it medicinally, this is what you could use for it in a culinary way. And then later I started using it more in a magical way. And then even more, now I understand it on a completely different level, simply because of the information we have now. The information we have on the scientific aspect, totally different. Like now I understand through science, like this, you can look it up somewhere. I'm not great with remembering details, but I read that plants actually can recognize like the people that care for them, who have transplanted them and water them. Like when you're within like a certain amount of distance from them, they recognize you're there. They recognize you. Like that's insane. But that's what all these crazy ass witchy people have been saying forever. I mean, that's why when you go and you harvest a plant, you tell the plant, I'm harvesting you for this, and I'm going to use you for this, and will you assist me with this? And you leave them a thankful offering. It's an exchange of energy. And even when if you learn on a like a horticulture, is that the right word, side, like you want to prune plants at certain times, like from my understanding, like when the moon is new, like it is now. Yes, happy new moon in Taurus, I think. I can't remember. Um, but like you want to harvest and do trimming sometimes when plants are in the new moon because there's not as much sap and going through the trees and like the plant juices. That's a weird statement, but like, it's a waning moon, and particularly in trees, like the sap is not running through the plant as thickly, or I'm having a hard time with words. I'm going through the perimenopause, and damn, I've been losing my words. It's just horrible. But you want to like trim things back more during a new moon than you would during a full moon because it's easier on the plants. And just with the knowledge that's out there now, it really can change how your path is and where your understanding is. And everybody's path is different. Where one person is and where another person is going to be totally different. And it doesn't even matter if they've been on the path for the same amount of time. Like some people are really focused on one thing. And that's great. I'm not one of those people. I'm eclectic. I'm an eclectic witch, and I've been an eclectic witch because I think I got a touch of the ADHD and I splatter everywhere. I have interests in all kinds of stuff. So I just kind of research a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and then I'll set that down, and then I'll pick it back up maybe 3 years later. Oh, I have the hiccups, excuse me. Okay. But like, I kind of pick up information after so many years. I might pick up information, put it down, and then come back to it later and pick it up again and do more extended research on it. Um, and so my knowledge is very, I I don't want to sound eager, but it's kind of vast, but I don't know extensive information on a lot of topics. I just know a lot of stuff about a lot of different things. And I've tried different things to see what works. While some people they may have been in a practice for 20 years, but they've only ever focused on maybe one or two things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But their practice changes as the time goes by. And you need to remember to give yourself grace. And it is okay if your practice doesn't look the same. There's going to be times, right now I'm actually coming out of a resting period. Pre-pandemic, I was on a roll. Oh my God, I was on a roll. I was hosting all kinds of private events, doing public rituals, doing water blessings. I got the privilege to do like a what was it? I don't know. I'm not really sure what we would call it, but I went with one of my friends with her child to like the creek to just kind of like initiate her child into the world. There's names for it. I can't think of the name for it. But I was doing all kinds of things, and then the pandemic hit, and I'm a care provider. I work in healthcare, and that with the pandemic, it just kicked my ass. It just kicked my ass. And I was in a quiet time for a very long time, very introspective, really focusing just on reading and studying and my own practice and just surviving life. And I'm just starting to get back into the groove of being out there and doing my thing for the other people. You know, your path changes throughout the years, and it's okay, and it will look different, and it will ebb and it will flow, and that is normal. And just embrace it and don't give yourself a hard time, and appreciate it for what it is, and take note of what you did do on those downtimes, because you'll find that you did. There's all kinds of the interesting thing with learning witchcraft and spiritualism and different religions is there's just a variety of things. The possibilities of subjects and things are just endless, just completely endless. There's so many different things to research. It's so many different angles. So, like, it might not look like you're practicing, but you really are. You really are. You might be like, oh, I'm not meditating every day, but you might be stirring some intention in your coffee in the morning. You might not be doing ritual all the time, but you might just be setting out in your garden and just existing and listening to nature. And that is just as valid as any other spiritual practice. If that's actually a very important part in my practice. It's just getting outside and existing, not doing anything, not looking for anything, just existing out in the elements, touching the grass, touching the earth, breathing the air, watching the trees. That alone is extremely important to your path. So give yourself some grace. Understand that as time goes by, your path will change, you will change, and it is normal and it is natural, and do not be upset about it. It's all good. All right. I think that's going to be a wrap for today. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Blessed new moon, and I'll see you all later. Peace out.